Welcome back to 101 East. Now, among the victims of China's economic slowdown, a migrant couple Luo Mengqin and Qin Hong, and several of their friends. With no savings, they couldn't even afford to take the train home to Sichuan province, some 3,000 kilometers away, when they lost their jobs. Instead, the group made the journey on old motorized tricycles, an arduous trek that took them 16 days. And when they finally arrived in their home village of Bajong, they discovered the economic crisis had got there first. Here's their story in their own words.
We left home because our living condition was not very good.
Our family is very poor.
3 families lived in this house. My husband's mum and dad, brother and his family, and our family.
It was really very crowded.
We went to Guangzhou in 2003. At that time, business in the place I worked was very good. However, last year the business situation turned bad. We did not earn very much and our living expenses were very high. So we decided to go back home.
We had no money to take the train. It would have cost us $100 to go home. We'd been without work for half a month already and had spent all of our money. So we decided to drive our motor tricycles back.
We suffered a lot on the way. We spent 16 days driving home. We slept under the tricycle at night.
Some restaurants cooked us food for free.
We were just like refugees. Once our tricycle broke down going up a mountain. My husband was angry and wanted to throw it away. But I said we had no choice but to move on.
By the time we reached Sichuan, we looked just like coal miners.
Our shoes were worn out. We were very dirty. For now, we plan to stay home and care for our children and the older relatives. We missed our children a lot. Every time I left, my children would beg me not to leave. They cried when I left. I really don't know what to do. I desire to earn more for the family, but I also want to spend more time with my children.
I bought a motorcycle so I can drive people around and earn some money. My children's education requires money. All we can do is work to make a living.
We built a house which has put us into debt for thousands of dollars. I do not even have a place to raise pigs. This is my life now. The economic situation is bad because of the crisis, so I can't earn a lot by going away to work.
Some of the companies I used to work for asked us to go back, but I'm afraid the situation will get bad again and we'll have to come back home.
Well, still with me here in our Kuala Lumpur studio are Jeffrey Crothall, who's the editor of the China Labour Bulletin, and Apo Leong, China coordinator of the Asia Monitor Resource Centre. Apo, before the break you mentioned social safety nets and the structure that exists in China. Tell us a little bit more about the hukou system and how they're coping with their structure.
The hukou, that is the household registration system, divides the people into 2 major categories: the rural population and the urban population. According to the hukou system, the urban population do entitled to political, social, economic, and lots of rights. And they robbed off the rural people when they migrate to the city. And that's why these poor farmers, they are not entitled to unemployment insurance when they return home. And this is one of the greatest defects of the social security system.
Is this a policy defect, or is this just part of the transition that China has been making in its economy?
This is a huge policy defect. It's a structural problem in China that's going to have huge consequences. It already has huge consequences and will continue to do so in the future.
The government doesn't recognize this?
I think it does, but it's very difficult to change such an ingrained institutional system.
There have been reports of violence in some cities, and history tells us that people who suffer economically eventually do blame their governments, and that's something Beijing must be very scared of.
Yeah, according to our survey, most of the people would go for the government for assistance or for help. You know, if the employment runs away, or if the wages they could not get, and they will ventilate their anger at the employers first. If the government mishandle this, to send in policemen and then mistreat them, then this will be violence. They block the highway. They will seize the factory properties. For example, if they want to go back home, they will seize whatever they can. At the last resort that they can lay their hands on.
So how close are we to some kind of problem? Beijing has always said its policy first and foremost is social stability.
Yes.
The outside world's first fear is Tiananmen Square again. Are we getting close to that at all?
I think the situation now is very different from 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it was a student-based movement focused on Tiananmen Square in Beijing. Today, workers who've lost their jobs are scattered all over China. They're not organized in one solid group, and they're far too busy trying to find a job. That's their number one priority.
But again, when the problem becomes bad enough, they will organize, they will get angry, and they will demonstrate. Will the Chinese government's reaction be an appropriate one?
Yes, I can see some modest move by the government, like for example, the green channels to handle the labor dispute, to pay on behalf of the employers, like Dongguan, like Shenzhen, to pacify the migrant workers so that they can return home peacefully. And also rehabilitation programs. The ACFTU, the All China Federation of Trade Unions, do piecemeal programs to hand out, to the poor migrant workers so that they can be pacified.
You say that the government is aware of the problem and the structural deficiencies. What are they doing to solve them, and how quickly is it moving?
In terms of providing social welfare for rural people, they are investing far more in social services in rural areas. The key area is healthcare and education, particularly since the advent of the financial crisis. A lot of migrant workers who've had their children with them in the cities have had to send their kids back home to school. And this has led to a huge increase in class sizes in rural areas. We're talking about 100 students in one class with very poor facilities and inadequate teachers.
What about the area of how they're structuring their economy? I mean, Jeffrey said it's now really a market system, but the way they've structured it is as a factory to produce goods for export. I mean, they're really very focused on that as their industrial model. Is that an appropriate one for the country?
For me, this is not appropriate because China also can have a huge internal consumption. So 1/3 of the factories is related with export-oriented. Whatever outside world suffers, China suffers more, and this is the disastrous situation now. So China would like to see, moving the factories to the hinterland to produce for internal consumption. But as long as China is opting for that GDP growth as first priority, I don't see much move towards what I call human development GDP or the green GDP. Look at the rivers, look at the mountains, look at the pollution.
And a lot of these decisions are obviously political ones. Now, it may be a market system in many ways, but politically speaking, it's still very much old style. Are we going to see a political problem developing because of the existing structure?
Not for a while. I think this is something that could develop over many years. But I think for most workers in China, the basic demands are that they're paid a decent wage for decent work, and if they are injured at work or have to leave work, then they get some kind of social safety net as well. It's very, very simple, basic demands at the moment.
And from a broader perspective of China's progress ever since Deng Xiaoping really released this latest phase of development, how well are they doing?
Oh, on the surface, it's done pretty well. But I see it from the other angle. What about the gap between the rich and poor? The corruption.
Yeah.
And all these vices, the other side of the coin can reflect. What I want to emphasize more is the growth of the civil society. The people has the right of association to articulate the voices for more freedom, for more participation in local politics, and also in higher level, which are all under very tight control in China.
And on that note, we'll have to leave it. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed
Thank you
for talking to us today. That's all we have time for on this edition of 101 East. See you again next time.